More than 2 decades ago, Kazakhstan introduced a housing savings system and launched a one-of-a-kind Жилстройсбербанк Bank, entirely owned by the state. Today, the bank goes by the dynamic name Otbasy and issues around 80,000 loans every year, totaling 1.2 trillion tenge, more than half of all mortgage loans in the country. That said, mortgages in Kazakhstan are still relatively uncommon compared to other countries, despite the huge demand for housing. Helping countless Kazakhstani families turn the dream of owning a home into reality. That's how Lyazzat Ibragimova, the head of Otbasy Bank, described their mission. I'm Uliana Ashimova, and this is The Profiles, a project by the Silkway TV channel. Here, we don't just ask questions and get answers. We delve deeper to uncover the stories behind the people whose work truly makes a difference. There has always been concern about the fairness of distribution in the housing queue. We'll talk about what will change with the Otbasy Bank's new status. We expect a flood of complaints. We'll talk about the fairness of the criteria. If it were up to me alone, I would absolutely prioritize families with children above all. How does Lyazzat Ibragimova respond to the claim that the Otbasy Bank isn't for everyone? It's not easy to stay disciplined, Uliana. Can you get a preferential mortgage for an apartment in a building that's still under construction? Don't purchase a property if there is no guarantee from Kazakhstan Housing Company. An in-depth conversation about the housing savings system. No one in this country knows the numbers behind Жилстройсбербанк better than I do. Lyazzat Ibragimova, chairwoman of Otbasy Bank since 2017, holds a PhD in economics. Over the years, she has built an impressive career working with the Damu Entrepreneurship Development Fund, the Bayterek Holding, and teaching at the Eurasian National University. Hello, Lyazzat Yerkenovna. I have to say I'm always impressed by how effortlessly you handle even the toughest critics of Otbasy Bank and its policies, patiently explaining the same things over and over. Does that come naturally to you? Well, first of all, I'm a former teacher and researcher. When you are confident in what you know, and I often say no one in this country knows the numbers behind Жилстройсбербанк better than I do. As for the tough feedback, I actually enjoy it. On Saturdays, I like visiting branches to hear directly from people and observe what's going on. I also have a Telegram channel where my PR team gathers all the day's feedback and comments. It's a great way to stay in tune with other clients. Our customers are unique. They are ordinary people who see the bank as a symbol of hope. Many have been saving up for years, and it's our job to make sure every product is explained clearly. Some might think, why is she always repeating herself? But that's exactly what I'm here to do. As chairwoman, it's my responsibility to stay connected with other clients. Well, we've got plenty of questions for you today too. Great, let's get started, Uliana. I'll show you around. Lyazzat Yerkenovna, I'd like to talk about the new status that Otbasy Bank is set to receive, the transition to a national development institution. This idea has been discussed for quite some time, even back when Жилстройсбербанк rebranded. Now it seems we are nearing the final stages. I'm curious about what this change will mean primarily for the citizens of Kazakhstan and how prepared the bank is to take on these new responsibilities after such a transformation. Absolutely right. We've been working on this legislative project for 3 years now, with lively discussions in both the working group and the Majlis, including input from various public organizations. The heart of the project is addressing the long-standing issue of housing queue, which currently includes includes 649,000 citizens. This queue is managed through the electronic portal e-Kazakh.kz, categorized by professional status. Whether you are a government employee, military personnel, or a pensioner, there is also a significant group of socially vulnerable citizens. Most people join this queue because all government support measures like rental housing without purchase rights, mortgage loans, and housing certificates are tied to queue status. Under the new law, we'll centralize this queue with all support measures based on the first criterion, the year of entry into the queue. There has always been concern about the fairness of distribution, how mayor's office selects applicants. In most cases, housing is distributed through an application process. A date is announced. Say the Astana mayor's office and the housing fund opens a competition for rental housing, and people are given 3-4 weeks to apply. After that, the applications are reviewed and processed. But many then complain that they didn't know about it or missed the announcement. Now our goal will be more proactive communication with queue members, sending SMS notifications about upcoming competitions they need to participate in. In some cases, we might consider selecting people based solely on the year they entered the queue and inviting them to specific support programs. For example, someone who joined the queue in 2007 should be given priority in document processing over those who joined in 2017. However, there are also priority groups such as large families. The second important criterion we'll consider is income per family member. As I mentioned these criteria, many people have likely wondered if they could qualify for the queue if they don't own property. The primary criterion is actually housing absence when a family doesn't have an apartment. But there could be cases where parents have multiple apartments. Our job as the National Development Institution will be to assess these situations using digital family profiles and income data. For instance, a single mother, widow raising 2 children and working as a kindergarten teacher would be considered differently than a single mother with the same status but working in a quasi-government company earning 800,000 tenge with 1 child. Clearly, the first case should receive housing support first. All government measures will be stratified according to income per family member, but there is a lot of work ahead, especially migrating the old queue. To make sure no one gets lost during this migration process. Absolutely, it's a government database, so there is no risk of anyone being overlooked. Another critical factor is ensuring that the entire process is transparent. What I find encouraging is that as we make things more open, public expectations naturally rise as well. We've established a public council that includes representatives from client groups with the most pressing needs and highest expectations of us. For instance, this year we brought on Aynagul Muzaffar, who leads a public foundation dedicated to address the challenges of single parents and large families. We also included Ruslan Turuspekov, the head of a group called Don't Be Silent Orphan, which advocates for orphaned children. We are in constant dialogue with them. Take last year, for example. When we introduced a program prioritizing individuals with disabilities and their families, some Some council members voiced their concerns and even came to us in groups, asking why we gave this group priority. We explained that our research showed these families typically have far lower incomes than others, even compared to large families or those with orphan status. Were you able to convince the council members that prioritizing families raising children with disabilities or individuals with disabilities themselves was the right approach? Did they eventually come around to your perspective? Yes, by the end of 2023, they understood and accepted it. However, the new legislation has also expanded priority to include additional groups, such as World War II veterans, veterans of similar status, and combat veterans. Orphans and large families also retain the same level of priority. We've done extensive work in collaboration with various associations. One of the more contentious discussions centered around single-parent families. That makes sense since single-parent families is such a broad term. It's a bit of a gray area, isn't it? It really is, and unfortunately in Kazakhstan the definition can be quite vague. I've even pointed out in public that when we offer additional support to divorced families as a criterion, it had unintentionally led to fraudulent divorces, turning it into a loophole or even an incentive. That's why for the first time we've separated widows and widowers into their own distinct category. In Kazakhstan, there are 649,000 people on the housing waiting list. However, a recent review by the Ministry of Industry revealed that 394,000 of them don't meet the required criteria. This isn't just a matter of small mistakes. Has this problem been building up over the years? Yes, the data has been accumulating for a long time. Much of it became outdated. So, Mayor's office wasn't verifying it? Verification is only possible if the person in the queue gives their consent, and more often than not, people refuse to provide it. Another major issue we faced was the way two words in the law, a right to free housing, shaped people's expectations. That phrase alone led many to sign up for the queue. For example, during the Shanrak program in 2021, we reached out proactively to those who had been on the list since before 2007. We offered them loans with a 5% annual interest rate and only a 10% down payment, but over 90% of them turned it down. Their reasoning: we've been waiting more than 15 years to receive free housing. We tried to explain that the supply of free or subsidized rental housing is very limited. It's now prioritized for large families and families raising children with disabilities. If you're on the list as a retiree, the chances of getting rental housing are slim, but most people simply said, "We've waited 15 years, we can't wait longer." This kind of response often reveals that their housing situation is already resolved to some extent. They might be living with their children or in another arrangements but remain in the queue just in case. It's as though they are thinking if the government improves its programs or starts distributing free housing in large numbers, or if there is another round of privatization, I want to be at the front of the line. You've often mentioned that the mortgage market in Kazakhstan is still underdeveloped and hasn't reached its full potential. At the same time, you recently made a statement about mortgages in Kazakhstan being accessible, and that remark was widely quoted. How do these two ideas align? When I talk about accessibility, I mean the housing and construction savings system. When I refer to the numbers, I'm highlighting the fact that there just aren't enough mortgages being issued in Kazakhstan. Frankly, I always advise my acquaintances to steer clear of taking out a mortgage with a 22% annual interest rate. Honestly, I feel that people who join the housing queue after 2017 are often the ones in genuine need of a place to live, especially young families. Take this as an example. A woman might come to me and say, "I've been on the waiting list for so many years." I'll ask her, "Where do you live now?" And she'll say, "With my daughter. She's married and has her own apartment." Then, just moments later, I'll meet someone else, a pregnant woman, clearly in her 6th or 7th month. She tells me, "We already have 2 kids and now we're expecting our 3rd or 4th. My husband works in a small private business. We have an income, but it's not consistent. Right now we're renting. Please let us have a mortgage. We'd much rather pay toward our own home. After the baby is born, I could even go back to work to contribute." It's obvious that families like hers, raising children, are the ones who need help the most. These are our young citizens, the next generation of our country. I believe we need to take a very close look at the criteria we use to decide who gets housing. If it was up to me alone, I would absolutely prioritize families with children above all. You mentioned if you were the one making the decisions, but who actually makes these decisions? Given the recent Forbes ranking naming you one of the most influential women in Kazakhstan, it's clear you are a key player in these decisions. Who else is involved? Well, first off, we have the government body, the Ministry of Industry and Construction, the Construction Affairs Committee. Our minister, Kanat Bisimbayevich, is deeply involved. He's very detail-oriented and we often find ourselves debating every nuance. He says that I sometimes have this habit of elevating individual cases, like widows or pregnant women, into principles, wanting to establish rules around them. I argue that life is made up of these small details or nuances. Government bodies tend to draft rules without considering the specifics. For example, we have over 200,000 people on the waiting list under the incomplete family category. I tell them, let's prioritize widows and widowers first. It will be more targeted and straightforward. When I talk to these women, they say even if they are divorced, they can still go after child support from the other parent. They can go to that living person and ask for help for their kids. One even asked, "Should I be talking to a gravestone?" She said such a terrible phrase. She doesn't have a spouse anymore. He's passed away. It highlights the importance of setting priorities. While we can't solve every individual case, the goal is to make quick, effective decisions. That's what the state expects from us, to act fast and get it right. And that's why we prioritized last year people who are raising children with disabilities or adults with disabilities. These categories are quite limited, you see, Uliana. You can't fake documents or intentionally have such a child, right? And then there is the case of people in incomplete families. They can fake divorces. Exactly. That's why our task as National Development Institution is to conduct a deep analysis both from individual cases and from the pain expressed by our citizens using the data we have. Do you think moving these functions from the mayor's office to the Otbasy Bank, to your department that handles complaints, will result in a lot more work? Yes, we expect a flood of complaints. We are preparing a system on the portal for easy filing and processing of complaints. Lyazzat Ibragimova, we are in Astana, where there is constructions everywhere, and there is this idea that Otbasy Bank depositors can buy an apartment in new buildings, especially if they don't have the full amount up front. Actually, this year we've exceeded all our housing loan targets. We are working closer with the Kazakhstan housing company, which is also part of the Bayterik holding. For more than 5 years, the Kazakhstan housing company has been issuing guarantees to ensure construction is completed. For a long time now, we've been telling people not to touch a property without that Kazakhstan housing company guarantee. Without it, there is a risk of fraud or unfinished projects. You could end up financing the first and second floors only to find there are no buyers left when you get to the 7th and 8th floors. At the bank, if a project has the Kazakhstan housing company's backing, we've developed a product where the equity agreement itself acts as collateral. In Astana, Ulyana, there is a boom in Kazakhstan housing company. Guaranteed projects almost a record-breaking number. Right now, there are about 100 options where Kazakhstan housing company's guarantees is in place, so you can actually buy an apartment in the under-construction buildings. In some areas there is a shortage, like in Pavlodar region, for instance, but we are working really closely with Kazakhstan housing company. They've sent their whole team out to the regions to meet with developers and explain things in person. It's a new approach that needs to be seen in practice. Developers have to witness it firsthand. Take Astana, for example. They built quickly and attracted investment because there was the Kazakhstan housing company's guarantee. The key is transparency. Only one account is open for the developer, and all the funds from buyers go into that single account. There is strict oversight at every level of the construction and how the money is used. There is no chance, for instance, of a CEO using construction funds to buy a new Mercedes. The money in that account is used strictly according to the project plan. Lyazzat Ibragimova, it's often thought that Otbasy Bank isn't for everyone. It's not just about being disciplined. People wonder how they can save up when they are barely covering their current expenses. How do you view that? Well, we see ourselves as a bank for ordinary people. Today is Saturday. It's not too crowded, but usually there are long lines. People bring their kids, and most of them are middle-income earners, making around 300,000–400,000 tenge a month. When we assess their affordability, they often need to include co-borrowers like parents, relatives, even friends. Saving up for this group is tough. It's not easy to stay disciplined, Ulyana. To walk through that door and step into this space, you have to make a commitment to cut out any more consumer loans. You need to set a no-credit rule for yourself. The goal is to save up for a home. I moved here in 1989 with just a red bag up on yellow minibus. I was born not far from here in the Yerementau district. I graduated in Bestubye, a small village near Stepnogorsk, and went on to study at the Tselinograd Agricultural Institute, which had a very prestigious economics department. I got married to my coursemate, compatriot, during my 5th year, and we moved around, renting about 12 different places before buying our first apartment. Let's say we are talking about a simple one-bedroom place costing 12 million. To buy it, you'd need to save up 6 million. Spread that out over 36 months and you are looking at savings at least 150,000 tenge a month. Not many families can manage that. Most families saving with us can only put away around 50 to 70,000 a month, which means it takes them almost a year to save up 1 million. And getting to their first apartment can really take around 7 years. It's a long time, isn't it? Well, it's not. If you start saving at 22, by 29 you'll own your first one-bedroom apartment. I know people complain on social media saying things like it's easy for them, they are bankers, they probably have big salaries. But we talk to our clients every day, and around 80,000 families in Kazakhstan move into their new homes each year thanks to our bank. I really see this as my personal mission because there are so few truly passionate people these days. Young people born after 2000 can be quite sensitive. When we talk to our staff and ask about their birth year, if they say they were born after 2000, it's better not to criticize too harshly because they are likely to quit quickly. But then there are those like this girl I met at 27 who tells me she's leaving because she's burned out. I look at her resume and think, how can you be burned out at 27? I remember being 27, writing my thesis, raising 2 kids, living with 3 nephews who were students, and she just says I'm burned out. Whenever I meet someone who's truly passionate, whose eyes light up, I always try to keep them around. I think the world depends on people like that, those who are passionate and really drive change.